There's a fundamental truth about human nature that people only truly value what they believe they could lose or what they've already lost. It's not because they're cruel or indifferent, but because comfort breeds complacency. The moment someone knows you'll always be there, they stop working to keep you. It's not personal, it's just how the mind works. Now let's talk about how this applies to your situation. If you've ever felt like he was slipping away and in response you tried harder, texting more, being extra available, proving your worth, you are unknowingly reinforcing the problem. Because what that tells him is, she's always there. No matter what I do, she's not going anywhere. There's no urgency, no reason to question himself, no fear of losing you. And if there's no fear of losing you, there's no real value attached to keeping you. But what happens when you remove yourself? When you stop showing up the way you always have? When the predictable comfort of your presence is replaced by silence? That's when the dynamic shifts. That's when he wakes up. Suddenly, you're not an option he can come back to whenever he pleases. Suddenly, he's forced to confront a reality where you no longer exist in his life. And that, more than anything, creates an emotional impact. This isn't about playing games. It's about breaking the cycle of being taken for granted. Because let's be honest, if you're at this point, you already know he hasn't been meeting you halfway. He hasn't been showing up with the same level of effort, the same consistency, the same appreciation. And every time you try to remind him of your worth, you unknowingly dilute it. Your value isn't in how much you can prove yourself to someone. It's in knowing that you don't have to. So what does it actually look like to remove yourself? It means cutting off the emotional access he's had to you. That might mean stopping the check-in texts, the little just thinking of you messages that make it easy for him to keep you at arm's length while still feeling like you're there. It might mean resisting the urge to watch his stories, to like his posts, to find subtle ways to remind him you exist. Because if he feels erased from your life, he will feel it hard. And here's where it gets interesting. The moment he realizes you're truly gone is the moment he starts to question everything. Wait, she's not chasing anymore? She's not reaching out? She's actually moving on? And that moment of realization is where regret starts creeping in. Because the truth is, people don't miss you when you're still lingering in their life in small, convenient ways. They miss you when they have to wonder about you, when they have to face the discomfort of your absence. Think about it. The most haunting feeling isn't just losing someone, it's knowing they don't need you anymore, that they've stopped looking back, that you are no longer a character in their story. That's what triggers regret. That's what makes someone come running back, not because you asked them to, not because you begged or convinced them, but because they felt the loss for themselves, and no one wants to be erased. But here's where most people go wrong. They remove themselves physically, but not emotionally. They stop texting, but they still wait by their phone. They don't reach out, but they stalk his social media. They don't say anything, but they check in through mutual friends. And guess what? That energy still reaches him. People can feel when they still have a hold over you. Real detachment isn't just about what you do, it's about what you feel. When you truly let go, that's when the shift happens. So if you want him to come running back, don't try to manipulate the situation. Just be the person who no longer needs him to return. Be the woman who respects herself enough to walk away, not as a strategy, but as a stand. And if he comes back, it won't be because you tricked him into missing you. It'll be because he genuinely realizes he let go of something rare. And if he doesn't, then you'll have freed yourself from someone who was never meant to stay. Either way, you win. There's a fundamental truth about human behavior that most people don't fully grasp. Attraction isn't just about physical chemistry, shared interests, or even history. It's about perceived value. The moment someone believes they can have you whenever they want, they stop valuing the effort required to keep you. This is why so many people feel the slow, painful shift from being the center of someone's attention to an afterthought. And when that shift happens, the natural instinct is to try to reverse it, to remind them of what you had, to prove your worth, to fight for what you once shared. But that's the mistake, because the moment you try to prove your value, you diminish it. Think about it. The things we chase, we give power to. The moment you start over-explaining yourself, over-texting, or overcompensating for the emotional distance they've created, you're reinforcing the idea that their approval is more important than your self-worth. And the more available you make yourself, especially when they're pulling away, the more you confirm that they can have you on their terms, not yours. So how do you flip the script? How do you shift from being the one chasing to being the one who is chased? By becoming the one thing human nature can't resist: a mystery. People don't chase what they fully understand. They chase what they can't quite figure out, what they thought they had but are suddenly uncertain of, what feels just out of reach. And the easiest way to create that shift isn't by playing games or pretending to be something you're not. It's by removing the emotional certainty they once had about you. Right now, if you feel like he's drifting, if he's stopped prioritizing you, it's because he's mentally categorized you as safe. Not in the healthy, comforting way, but in the predictable way. He doesn't have to think about whether you'll text. He doesn't have to wonder if you're thinking about him. He doesn't have to question what would happen if he fully disappeared for a few days, because deep down, he already knows you'll be there. And that certainty makes him complacent. So what happens when that certainty disappears? What happens when suddenly you're not texting him first, when you're not reacting to his last minute plans, when you're no longer leaving little breadcrumbs that say, I'm still here if you decide to care again? He notices. Not immediately perhaps, but he does notice, because suddenly there's a gap where your presence used to be. And that gap creates a void that forces him to ask questions. Is she mad? Is she over me? Is she seeing someone else? And those questions make him think about you in a way he hasn't had to in a long time. See, people don't fear losing what they know they have. They fear losing what they think they might have already lost. And that fear triggers something powerful. It forces them to start seeing you differently, to stop taking you for granted, to start realizing that maybe, just maybe, they miscalculated. But here's the catch. You can't fake this. You can't pretend to be detached while secretly waiting by your phone for his reaction. You have to be the person who is moving forward. You have to genuinely shift your focus away from him, not as a strategy, but as a decision to prioritize yourself, your happiness, your energy, your own sense of peace. Because here's the truth. The most magnetic, irresistible people in the world aren't the ones trying to be chosen. They're the ones who have already chosen themselves. They're the ones who radiate confidence, not because they're playing hard to get, but because they genuinely are hard to get, hard to distract, hard to manipulate, hard to pull back into a dynamic that doesn't serve them. So, what does this look like in practice? It means living a life that excites you, regardless of who's watching. It means saying no to things that don't meet your standards. It means shifting your energy away from waiting for someone else to wake up and instead focusing on becoming so fulfilled that their attention feels like a bonus, not a necessity. And when you do this, when you genuinely reclaim your time, your energy, your power, something remarkable happens. Not only do you become more attractive to the person who once overlooked you, but more importantly, you become more attractive to yourself. You start to see yourself differently. You start to respect yourself more. And in doing so, you set a new standard for how others will treat you. Because in the end, the goal isn't just to make him chase you, it's to make him earn you. And if he doesn't, then you've just made space for someone who will. There is something undeniably powerful about silence. Not the awkward kind, not the passive-aggressive kind, but the kind that speaks volumes without saying a single word. The kind that forces someone to sit with the reality of your absence, to feel the weight of your withdrawal. Because here's the truth. When you stop reacting, when you stop filling the space with explanations, when you stop trying to remind someone of your worth, they're left with nothing but the consequences of their own actions. Most people underestimate how uncomfortable it is to be ignored by someone they once had access to. We assume that if we pull back, they won't notice. That if we detach, they won't care. But that's where we get it wrong. Because human nature is wired for attention. It craves validation. It thrives on certainty. And the moment you take that away, you disrupt the balance of power in a way that forces them to reevaluate everything. Think about it. When someone pulls away from you, your instinct is to close the gap, to reach out, to seek answers, to do whatever it takes to restore the connection. But what happens when you don't? What happens when, instead of fighting for their attention, you make them feel what life is like without yours? At first, nothing, at least not outwardly. They might seem indifferent. They might even act as if they don't notice. But internally, the shift has already begun, because where there was once predictability, now there's uncertainty. Where there was once access, now there's distance. And that distance creates the one thing that reignites attraction better than anything else: intrigue. You see, when someone knows they can have you at any moment, they don't have to think about what losing you would feel like. But when you remove yourself, when you step back and let the silence do the work for you, you force them to experience a version of reality they weren't prepared for. A reality where you're not waiting, where you're not chasing, where you're not available at their convenience. And in that silence, something remarkable happens. They start to wonder, did I misjudge this? Did I take them for granted? Have they moved on? That uncertainty creates discomfort, and discomfort creates urgency. Because now, instead of you trying to pull them back in, they're the ones questioning whether they let go too soon. But here's the most important part. You have to mean it. This isn't about pretending to be detached while secretly hoping they'll reach out. It's not about playing a game to manipulate their emotions. It's about making a fundamental shift in how you view yourself and your worth. Because when you truly detach, when you genuinely stop seeking their validation, you become someone they have to work to get back. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you're genuinely hard to get. Not because you're withholding love, but because you refuse to give it where it's not being fully appreciated. And that's where the real transformation happens. Because the moment you stop trying to prove your value, you force them to recognize it on their own. You give them the space to miss you, to feel your absence, to realize that you were never just an option. They just treated you like one. And if they come back, it won't be because you begged. It won't be because you convinced them. It will be because they felt the shift. They experienced what life is like without you, and they didn't like it. But here's the thing, by the time they do, you might not even want them anymore, because in the process of reclaiming your power, you'll have discovered something far more valuable, the version of you that never needed to chase in the first place. One of the greatest mistakes people make when trying to reattract someone is assuming that the key to winning them back lies in direct pursuit. They think if they just explain themselves better, show how much they care, or remind the other person of what they once had, things will change. But here's the truth. Someone isn't going to regret losing you because you told them they should. They're going to regret it because they feel it. And that's where true detachment comes in. Not the kind where you sit around waiting for them to notice your absence, but the kind where you shift your focus so completely that they can sense without a single word that they are no longer a central character in your story. That's what creates the emotional gap that makes them take a second look. Think about the dynamics of power in any relationship. When someone knows they have your full attention, your full emotional investment, they don't have to work for it. They don't have to question it. It's a given. And human nature thrives on mystery, on challenge, on the uncertainty that keeps things interesting. So when you remove yourself from that equation, when you stop offering them that unwavering attention, they are forced to confront a version of reality where one of the most powerful shifts you can make in your life is realizing that your value doesn't come from someone else recognizing it. It doesn't depend on whether they miss you, whether they regret losing you, or whether they finally wake up and see what they had. It exists independently of their perception. And the moment you start living from that truth, everything changes. Not just in how they see you, but in how you see yourself. See, most people operate under a fundamental misunderstanding when it comes to relationships. They believe that in order to be wanted, they have to prove their worth. They have to demonstrate what they bring to the table, remind someone of how much they care, or subtly or not so subtly, make the other person realize what they're missing. But what if I told you that the most attractive thing you can do is stop trying to prove anything at all? Think about it. What kind of person doesn't need to prove their worth? The one who already knows it. The person who isn't looking outward for validation because they are deeply secure in themselves. That's the kind of person who draws people in. Not because they're playing hard to get, not because they're using some manipulative strategy, but because they genuinely exude a level of confidence and self-assurance that is rare. Now, let's talk about how this plays out when someone starts to feel erased from your life. Because the moment you stop seeking their validation, the moment you stop trying to remind them of your value, something fascinating happens. They feel the shift. They notice that your energy is no longer directed at them, that where there used to be effort, now there is absence. And that absence is what creates the space for them to actually miss you. See, people don't miss what's constantly available. They miss what they can't have, what they thought would always be there, but suddenly isn't. And the thing is, it's not enough to just physically remove yourself. You have to emotionally detach as well, because if you're still watching their moves, if you're still checking their social media, if you're still secretly hoping they reach out, they can feel that. Maybe not directly, but on some level they know. But when you truly let go, when you step into a version of yourself that no longer revolves around whether they notice you or not, that's when they do notice, and not just notice, but feel a sense of unease, a realization that the place they once held in your life is no longer reserved for them. This is where regret comes in. Because when someone realizes that their absence hasn't left the void they expected it to, they start questioning everything. Did I make a mistake? Was I wrong about them? Have they really moved on without me? And those thoughts are powerful, not because you force them, but because they arise naturally when someone is faced with the reality of losing something they once took for granted. Now, let me be clear. This isn't about punishing them. It's not about making someone suffer just for the sake of it. It's about breaking the cycle where you suffer because you keep waiting for them to validate your worth. It's about choosing yourself so completely that they have no choice but to reevaluate their decisions. And even more importantly, it's about shifting the entire way you approach attraction and relationships. Because when you stop seeking approval, when you stop waiting for someone else to wake up, you become the kind of person who naturally commands attention, the kind of person who doesn't need to be chased because you are already moving forward. That's the irony in all of this. The moment you stop hoping they'll chase you, the moment you stop needing that external validation, is the moment they are most likely to come running back. Not because you wanted them to, but because you no longer needed them to. And that's what makes all the difference. So if you take one thing away from this, let it be this: your value does not diminish just because someone failed to see it. And the most powerful thing you can do is live your life in a way that makes you proud, that fills you up so much so that